next presenter will be discussing from storm clouds to storage. Clouds 10 years later, and I'd like to introduce Mrs. Paula Pickering of Foreshore. Paula Pickering is an IT disaster recovery specialist and is a recognized AML, that is anti-money laundering certified professional. She is the managing director of eShore Cayman Limited. However, for the last 14 years, she has represented Foreshore, a world-class offshore data center. Mrs. Pickering was the first consultant in Grand Cayman, 2003, to qualify as a CBCP, Certified Business Continuity Professional. So if you're interested in becoming that, Paula's the person to talk to since she's the first, right? Okay. And was a founding partner of IFS Cayman, which is recognized as the first DRaaS seeding and co-location facility in Grand Cayman back in 2000. Paula moved to Grand Cayman in 1996. She received her Bachelor of Science from Western Michigan University in 1989 and continued with postgraduate studies at Oakland University and Wayne State University. And she has continued her professional development ever since. Please give a welcoming hand to Paula Pickering.
Thank you very much. Let me just see if Omar's got my slides up here. Let's see, I'll find them, I think. Just a moment. And Chuck, thank you for your intro, which led right into mine. So I do appreciate that. We're all set. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Connor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As Mr. Connor mentioned, I'm Paula Pickering, and I work with Foreshore Caribbean and Latin America. Now, I know I stand between you and a brief break, so I'll try and get through these slides very quickly so we can get back on track a little bit. But I wanted to start off with a quick little joke to wake everybody up after their lunch. So it kind of ties together my former career as an automotive engineer and now an IT engineer. So my joke for the afternoon is there's 4 engineers, and they go to get into a car, but the car won't start. The first engineer is a mechanical engineer. He looks and he says to the other engineers, it's definitely a broken starter. The second engineer is a disaster recovery engineer. Says, nope, it's definitely a dead battery. The third engineer, a chemical engineer, says, no, probably impurities in the gasoline. Well, the fourth engineer, an IT engineer, however, suggests, hey guys, I have an idea. Why don't we just get out of the car and get back in again? Wouldn't it be nice if we could reboot life the same way? That would be good. So with that, I'm going to go on and talk a little bit about what I'm here to chat about today, which is from storm clouds to storage clouds, 10 years later. I've been doing disaster recovery planning and continuity management since 1999. I've been in Cayman, as Mr. Connor mentioned, since 1996. Currently in the Caribbean, our company looks after over 200 plus clients around the Caribbean and 7 different countries. Very happy to see a few of you here today. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about disaster recovery as a service, continuity planning, and I guess ask the really difficult question, which is sometimes controversial, which is the disaster recovery solution the real disaster? So from storm clouds to storage clouds, since I'm in 2004, I want to give you an idea of how things have shifted for me personally and how we moved into the cloud. And a little bit, here's my agenda, and I'll try and get through it quickly, is what is the landscape that we have today? And where are we going with IT challenges, some of the business conflicts, how is cloud a game changer, my favorite topic, which is email, and then I'll do a quick review of some system data, desktops, and some summary and take any questions from you. So first off, my statistics are off a little bit. The 1.85 billion, I think, was 2004 before they calculated in 2005. What Chuck brought up was 3.85 billion, which is correct. So I'm not going to go through too much of the statistics, and I'm sure you've all heard a lot about Hurricane Ivan. But what's really interesting to me is in my career, my personal experience, 90% of all disasters or events that I've worked with have had nothing to do with weather. So that's a bit of a shift for you. Most of the things that I've worked with clients over the years have been fires, floods, arson, disgruntled employees ripping things out on their way out the door, or breaking confidentiality laws and taking documents and emailing them to themselves. Just last week, I was working with a company who spent 6-8 hours of downtime due to a spam attack, a unified threat URL. And last week we had 2 earthquakes, which kind of shook things up a bit, unintended, to remind us that there's other things out there other than hurricanes. So between the rolling power outages and some of the other things that we look at, we just want to realize that some of these things are going to happen on a sunny day. So 10 years later, what are some of the lessons that we've learned? I think we've learned a lot. And as Chuck pointed out, things are just much better from a business perspective. And we're very grateful for the Cayman Islands Hazard Management Group and their website with all the useful information. Most businesses do have better plans. But I think we still have some of the same conflicts and some of the same challenges we had in 2004. Again, as Chuck pointed out, I think the budget challenge and the money issue tends to be the main thing. We still find that people are compromising or underutilized assets. We find that folks will either buy too much and end up having server rooms full of unused assets, never fully utilized, or they undervalue or underplan. So one of the things we also find is things are getting more challenging with the amount of devices, new applications. You know, that boss who's bought his new Mac Airbook because he just thought it was so cool and he can't live without it. Well, all of these bring your own devices have turned into a little bit of a nightmare for our IT challenges today. So with that, we have to look to see how are we going to protect the changing world. And the same challenges are there. And the number one challenge, the bottom line there, is always trying to get that executive buy-in to see disaster recovery as more than just expensive and to show them what the return on investment really can be. So I am going to throw up a few of my personal slides, being that I was lived in South Sound at the time of Hurricane Ivan, which was one of our most devastated areas on the island. So this is Welcome to South Sound, which does look a lot better these days. First, I'm going to say back in 2004, business continuity planning, how far have we come? I think there was a focus on IT recovery primarily, only before Hurricane Ivan. I'd like to say that the norm has changed, but back then the classic example was the one-page plan, or borrowing a plan, or just getting through the tick box. Obviously, we've seen a huge improvement on that. Little or formal documentations existed in 2004, procedures at best, or maybe an annual IT recovery. Maybe some bare metal servers, but people not really sure where they were or how they were going to store, or maybe they didn't test enough. So it sort of put together a perfect storm of how things could go wrong. But the good news is, since 2004, we have some new options to aid in disaster recovery and business continuity. And some of those items I'll just go through here briefly, which we're very proud of from a Cayman perspective, is on island. We have a few mini cloud options locally. IT providers have become aware themselves. Do-it-yourself backup technologies. I don't know how many people have their iPhone, and obviously right up to the iCloud. Server availability and recovery technologies, virtualization, massive improvement in bandwidth options, and satellite phones, and people integrating as many possible applications off and island as possible. Off island, we have cloud services such as the ones that our company provides in the Channel Islands. Backup technologies have changed from just backup to replication, such as eVault and Zerto and some of the things that we employ. Bandwidth growth and route diversification. And that's very key for a lot of the financial services businesses that want to keep as much of their information offshore, not for any nefarious reasons, but just for the fact that that is their choice and their stakeholders' choice. And with diverse IP routing, people can actually decide where their data is going to transit and where it's going to be at rest. Virtual desktops, coming of age, email archiving or email continuity, which is my near and dear favorite, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about offshore email in a moment with Mimecast, and hosted voice over IP services. So these are just some of the things we've seen advancing since 2004. Another picture, this is when I tried to get into my parking lot and my neighbor had blocked my house, and my house is somewhere behind all that. So there's another picture of South Sound. So on island, we have Citrus Grove, Dart, Line, One Technology Place, lots of extra dedicated work area spaces. We've integrated into our plans working at home, adding social apps into our Skype, Facebook, you name it, lots of awareness in a lot of different ways. Some of these things have gotten very clever. Off-island, we find a lot of companies are doing sister agreements with offices in other jurisdictions. So in case they are impacted, they can rely on agreements with other folks to help them get back up to speed in case they're incapacitated. Again, more dedicated work areas and recovery sites off-island. Mobile recovery centers, SunGuard can fly in huge containers. And again, social apps that keep us all connected. You know, WhatsApp, Facebook, you name it. One of the things I want to mention as we go through some of this, and this is the picture of the house in front of my house in South Sound, who I thank very kindly for saving my house because he took the brunt of it. Mine ended up just missing windows, doors, and a lot of sand, but that's the front of South Sound. Many of you know Winter. So in 2007, our hazard management Cayman Islands was established. Chuck mentioned very importantly, in 2007, we also had some stricter requirements from our financial service providers to be more stringent in their business continuity planning, which became very much a bigger part of their audit. And one of the things I like to mention, though, very much like Mr. Connor mentioned and Chuck had mentioned as well, is the human element. So we talked about those evacuation plans and the private charters that companies had set up. One of the things that I still ask folks to keep an eye on is the false sense of security that might come in to play. If you assign a person that's their job to go to New York, just check that visa waiver or that ESTA availability. 2007, when my son was born, Hurricane Dean was barreling down on Georgetown Hospital, and my husband and I evacuated, but we couldn't go to the United States because as a doctor, he was one of the last people off the island, writing all prescriptions. And the only thing left for us was a charter plane. Well, as a British citizen, he didn't have a visa waiver. So off to Bahamas we went. So again, keep an eye on where in your plans you keep in mind things like immigration and limitations in that human element. So part of your program development and management, again, things that we need to think of that we haven't, what falls between the cracks. What's best practice? We do find in this day and age, very pleased to see that there are quite a few folks who have employed some new software technologies, EBRP, MyCoop, people using SharePoint to build their plans. HiQ is a great collaboration, one that's hosted by Foreshore, a customer of ours. And my very favorite one is ReadySmith. These are some guys up in Toronto who I think have built the simplest plan with a wiki that is easy to make it part of a living, breathing part of your community. And the main point here is to find whatever works for you, to constantly make a holistic approach to business continuity practices part of your living, breathing culture in your company. Not just that 3-ring binder that sits on the shelf that gets dusted off once a year when somebody calls up and says they're coming in for the test. So risk-based planning, not just scenario-based, meaning let's not plan just for hurricanes or for floods. Let's have a plan that addresses any issue. Media plan is another one. I know Omar and I were speaking before at the break about having that PR plan or having that preparation for who's going to talk to the media. I mean, you know it's a bad day if you walk in your office and 60 Minutes is sitting there waiting for you. That could be a disaster in itself. So how am I doing on time, Christina? We good? Okay, so I'm looking real quick, and I'm not going to talk too much about technology because I know Tim's going to follow a little after me and talk about clouds as well. So I'm going to skim through some of the computing part and talk a little bit more about DR past and present. So what's distinct? What's the cloud all about? Well, cloud is a fancy way for what we used to call virtual dedicated servers, and it's just renting space instead of owning it yourself. A bit of a multi-tenanted environment. It can be private, it can be public. The three distinct characteristics that differentiate cloud from traditional hosting and where it fits in with IT is it's sold on demand, typically by the minute or by the hour. The version that we sell at Foreshore is actually a pay-as-you-go, which folks out in the Caribbean will love, not paying for something until they need it. It's elastic, meaning that we can have as little as we want, or we can spin up more at a given time. Again, not paying for stuff until we need it. And the service being managed by a provider. Again, this is where some of the cost savings come in. One of the probably misconceptions of cloud at an early inspection was the fact that it was too expensive. And I think people didn't realize, or they weren't taking into account what's out there in the traditional methods of having two of everything and the electricity to run it, and multiple licensing, and overheads, IT technical contracts in multiple places, and most importantly, things for the Cayman Islands is the travel to get between point A and point B. So the cloud offers, at second glance, a bit of a cost savings. It's also a good toe dip in the water for folks who want to try out cloud for disaster recovery and then consider it later for some production stuff. Good news is most of our stores are small, less than 1 gig. We've been doing backups and things since 1999. As a matter of fact, right before Hurricane Ivan, we had a few people that were quite grateful that their companies decided to put in that backup off-island solution. But what we do find is people use this all the time. They use it all the time. And every time they do, it's an example of their disaster recovery test. So if you've been working all night on that Excel sheet and it gets zapped, and you want to just log on and authenticate, make sure your credentials are good, and whoop, there it is right there in the file structure. Let's get that Excel sheet back to me as soon as possible. You've just done a disaster recovery test. So again, the good news is restores done up in the cloud can be immediate. Now I'm going to do a quick alphabet soup for you guys. DR, VCP, RTO, RPO, a little bit of an alphabet soup. Thank you. What we do find is interesting is the RTO, or recovery time objective, and RPO, recovery point objective, is very important to our businesses today. And the analogy I like to use on this is it's a little bit like a car. So your recovery time objective is how much time you can afford to be down. Minutes, seconds, and if you're American Express, you pretty much have to be up ever since things went down. No downtime is allowed. And a recovery point objective means what is acceptable for loss. What point in time do you have to come back from? So again, if you're American Express, your recovery point might be that last transaction, or an ATM machine, that last transaction, you can't lose it. Whereas if you're maybe an accounting firm or something, maybe you can recreate that Excel sheet you did or what have you the last day. So your recovery point and your recovery time objectives are very critical because they also relate to money. So again, here's my car analogy being from Detroit. If you have a 0 RTO and a 0 RPO, and you have to be back up, always on, instantaneously, you're going to be driving a bit of a Cadillac when it comes to disaster recovery. But if you can have 4 hours or 8 hours of acceptable time to get back to live, or you can recreate a little bit of that point objective information, redo it if you have to, maybe you're going to be driving a Volkswagen. I mean, both of them will get you to where you're going, but one of them's going to cost a little bit more. I myself drive a Kia, just kind of right there in the middle. So going on to a little bit of cloud as a game changer, and we've talked a little bit about where and how traditional went to the cloud. My favorite example of cloud, oops, I'm not getting the email yet, is, again, this is just a slide emphasizing that recovery time objective, recovery point objective. The first one in green is 0 seconds. The next one is recovery in minutes. The next one in orange is recovery in hours. And the last one might be your old physical IT take backups. And that's going to be days. And again, cost is going to be relative to how quickly you need to be back in business. So cloud changes the paradigm. The shift is the ways things are doing computing. We have things a little bit more scalable. We have ways that we can do things in the cloud with security, flexibility, accessibility, and affordability. And to give you an example of the three types of cloud for business, you've got software as a service, the first left-hand cloud. In the middle, you've got disaster recovery as a service, and the last one is infrastructure as a service. So think about your examples of, say, software as a service might be QuickBooks Online or your Skype, whereas disaster recovery as a service might be that eVault backup or double take replication, and it's all going to the cloud. Infrastructure as a service is strictly buying the resource. It decides how much you need, what kind of specification are you going to need to really flail over into your own rented infrastructure in the cloud. Just to make sure we're all still awake, I'll throw a cartoon up there. Unfortunately, now that we are all virtual, it means we have to work 24/7 no matter where we are. So on to my favorite subject, which is email. And I just want to say this real quickly. In 2006, we heard from our clients that the RTO for email was as close to zero as possible. And I find it kind of ironic that when I go into clients, and I'll go into whether it's a bank or a law firm or what have you, and I'll talk to the CEO, because 99% of all CEOs will cite email as their #1 business critical application. So I'll ask the CEO, what's the most important critical application? I have to have email. Gotta talk to my stakeholders. Gotta talk to my customers. Gotta talk to my wife. Well, then you get to the IT manager, the IT director, and you say, I need to know what your most critical application is. And of course, works at a bank, so he's going to say, it's got to be that ATM, that line of banking application. That's the most critical. And I try and get these two people in a room to make sure they work for the same company, because there's always a bit of a disconnect. So in 2006, our clients told us that the most important application was email. They couldn't be without it for a second. They wanted it on their phone, they wanted it in the cloud, they wanted it everywhere. So what we did is we went out and found Mimecast offshore, hosted it in Channel Islands, and I'm proud to say 43% of business email flowing in the Cayman Islands is currently through the Mimecast offshore gateway. 39% in Bermuda, and I think over 200 in some clients Caribbean wide. The reason it's so popular, other than the fact it was relatively cheap and easy to install, was the fact that this is what computer rooms used to look like. Anti-spam devices, encryption, archiving, email routers, DDoS mitigation, a bunch of stuff that we don't really know more of that alphabet soup stuff on. And then what folks said they wanted to do was simply just find a way to get it all unified. So you used to have this fragmented computer room with all kinds of stuff. And then, with the Mimecast offshore service, just found a way to put it all up in stream in the cloud. And most importantly for continuity, if a server went down, clients could still get their mail delivered to their Outlook client. So when the server comes back up, the mail deduplicates, and we all go back to business as usual. But clients, customers, end users, or employees never have to leave their desk, their little Outlook inbox, because they don't know anything's gone on in the background. The mail just comes to where they're used to sitting, right at their Outlook client. Now, if they can't get to Outlook, then we have to say, okay, now what? Well, there's a browser application that's tied in, so as long as they can get to an internet cafe, they can still get their email, as long as they've been given the correct security permissions from their management. So one of the things we were looking at, I'm going to slip through some of this, is how we could be more effective with folks 24/7, always on, with all these new bring your own disasters devices. I mean, how people were going to be able to stay up 24/7. So I'm going to move on very quickly to systems and desktops before we talk about a case study and I wrap up. And again, I won't get too technical. Tim's going to come up and give you a bit more overview on some of the cloud options. So I'll just look at one of my favorites, which is the online backup service that works quite well in Ivan. Using existing IT and existing internet, a lot of clients of ours tend to use backup solutions and just put their data simply from their desktops, their laptops, their servers, and put them up in an encrypted tunnel that they create with their own internet connection. The software is free, and they just store it off-site in the cloud. Now you can pick a cloud in North America, Amazon, you name it, or offshore. What we see as a recovery service is the next level is folks wanted to have something to fail over into. What was that restore going to look like? So what we did is we ended up working on the cloud so that people could actually move from that traditional colo situation to a cloud situation. And this is a good slide for the cost benefits. This assumes 99% uptime, and this is the cost of a traditional former half rack. And moving into the cloud, the costs we see are about 50% savings for most businesses when they virtualize that primarily disaster recovery environment and move it to the cloud. Desktop as a service has become quite popular. Having your mobile device, your remote office, that tablet, being able to actually use anything from that boss's Mac mini Air book that he doesn't want to leave home with, but you want it to look like his work environment. So people are moving a little bit more to desktop as a service. I do warn folks that it should be tested because latency can be an issue out here in the Caribbean, depending on where you're at. But it is something to look at, especially from a disaster recovery perspective. Because things being a little slower in a disaster is okay, at least you still have them. So in the 90s, we used to have PCs as a desktop. Then in 2008, we had desktops moving into data centers. In 2010, along came the cloud, and people started leveraging the cloud as a service. They found they had lower capital investment, they could centralize their management, they could have elastic, scalable services for their business. So lastly, I want to give you guys a quick example of how does this mean? What does it mean? What's a real-life example of how this all fits together? So what I want to do is give you a quick disaster recovery as a service case study. This is from a Cayman trust company that we worked with. They had a challenge to reduce their disaster recovery costs. They wanted to reduce their recovery time. They wanted to get rid of the need for hardware and software. And they wanted to have less management of the whole thing, make it. So what the solution was is we looked at their critical data, which had an RPO 1 minute, and a recovery time objective for their systems of 1 hour. Some of their business apps, they could decide to do 12-hour RPO and an 8-hour RTO. So we decided the best thing for these guys would be a hybrid. Let's replicate some things that need to be real-time, always on. But other things, if we want to save some money, let's just go to more of a traditional backup, almost like a virtual tape, an online backup. So we gave them an infrastructure as a service resource pool, but we gave them pay-as-you-go equipment to file into the cloud to keep the costs down. And of course, they had Mimecast for offshore email because they couldn't be without that email from the wife for even 30 seconds. So the benefits we found was the zero capital investment or CapEx cost. The disaster recovery costs were reduced by 50%. The testing and service improved by, they say, 100%. And we found that their backups outsourcing were less than what they were paying their team for their daily cups of coffee. It's tested annually, fully documented, and available 24/7. Most importantly, it gave them a peace of mind. And with that, I'm going to leave you with a quick summary. This is a picture of our office in Georgetown above the coffee shop in Hero Square. So if you have more questions you think of after this and you're less shy, please drop by and see me for a cup of coffee. Or if you're ever in the Channel Islands in the summertime, which I recommend, it's pretty cold in the wintertime, there's a coffee bar data center over there in Jersey Channel Islands. So with that, hopefully I got things a little closer to our break this afternoon, but I wanted to thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you about business continuity planning, and I have more jokes on the break if anybody likes it. So that's it. Thank you very much.